right, we've got everyone here. Go ahead and share my screen.
Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone.
Oh my goodness, look at that. It's our pictures and everything. All right, so a couple of things. This is a little bit of housekeeping for everyone here. It looks like we've got a fair number of people in the room already for the live conversation. I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping logistics. Number one, the number one question we always get asked is this being recorded? The answer is absolutely. The second thing is, will I get a copy of this recording? And the answer is yes. You can look to your email once we finish the post-production. We'll get you a link to this webinar so you can share it with others. If people just don't believe what you actually heard was true, actually, I don't think that's going to be the case at all. The last one is we would love to get your questions. There is a chat panel. You can send it privately just to the host or publicly to everyone else. We encourage you to have open discourse throughout this conversation. You can talk amongst one another, but also you can ask questions of us. We are saving plenty of time for the end of this discussion to answer any questions that you have. So we'll be moving on to the actual formal portion of this webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us for our Let's Talk IoT Devices webinar series. This is the fourth part, and this is Smart IoT Buttons. And today we've got Dora, an IoT device product manager at Soracom, and I'm Ryan, a longtime product developer who turned marketing, and I do marketing here at Soracom. So we're very excited to discuss this topic. The things that we're going to be talking about today are the early buttons, what's available in the market, how to choose different types of connectivity beyond just cost and coverage. Then we'll be getting into the specifics of the LTE-M button that Soracom has put out into the world. And then we'll go through some use cases. These will actually be where the rubber hits the road, and we can have some real world examples of what some of the architecture would look like and how some of these things get put together. And of course, your questions. And we're looking forward to getting any that you might have. Feel free to ask them throughout as we can fit them in line if they are an appropriate question to be asking at that time. Quick thing about Soracom. Soracom is a IoT cellular connectivity company that is built for IoT applications. Over 25,000 businesses, over 5.5 million connections. Back in 2015, some founders said, why is it that it's so hard to get cellular devices connected to the cloud? And they went ahead and did that by reproducing and virtualizing cellular technology on AWS's infrastructure, so eliminating a whole bunch of the back-end hardware. So just like when we used to see websites, when we had a server closet in our back room and hosted our own website, telcos still do that today with their big racks of hardware, and Soracom has found a way to make IoT accessible to everyone. So if you've want to learn more, check out more at soracom.io. Be happy to entertain any conversations, put you in touch with a solutions architect if that's something you'd like. Moving on, Dora, we're going to talk about the evolution of just buttons in products.
Yeah, and would you have said or thought that we didn't even have buttons available 150 years ago, Ryan?
I would.
They appeared.
We had chickens. That's what we had.
Yes. Actually, the first everyday product with a button that appeared was around 1890, and that was the flashlight. Then, about 20 years later, we got the doorbells. Until then, people were just simply knocking on the door. And then, with radio buttons, remote controls, which actually gave people the control over powering and controlling the different machines. We got also automation panels as the industry certainly evolved. And you might remember your first Nintendo game console back in the 80s and 90s that also gave buttons some instrument of play. Then, with the appearance of the internet back in the 1990s, we actually got some shapeless buttons that didn't actually look like buttons. So you could click on anything from text to icons, so they could be used as clickable links. Then, with the appearance of the iPhone back in the 2000, we got some Surface buttons that are kind of a mix of virtual and physical buttons, and they give a single tactile experience. And back in the 2010s, we started to see the appearance of different smart buttons or IoT buttons. They started off in the home automation, but we could also see them spreading around within the industrial areas.
I remember seeing the
And then,
the Tide buttons and the Amazon buttons go out into very small test markets, and hearing about uh, an entirely different way of like untethering some of these experiences where it was so app driven, everything turned into an app, and we started realizing that either handing out $1,000 pieces of hardware or requiring people to bring your own device in order to accomplish a untethered task uh, became unfeasible. So, but what happened to the buttons themselves, Dora? Why don't we have Tide buttons anymore?
so what happened with Dash was the following. They were created back in 2015, and as you were saying, they gave a quite cool, untethered experience because you could spread them around your home and you could use it to replenish different goods, be it pet food, be it detergent, be it different household items. And when Amazon Alexa came along, uh, Amazon thought that the button needs to give way to the actual voice controlled order automation. So that was the end of the Amazon Dash button. And it left quite some gap, not only within consumers, but it started to get some traction also within industrial applications. And that's when we from Soracom started to look at the first IoT buttons back in Japan in our home country.
So this is where Amazon is famous for cannibalizing their own product lines in order to build relevance. No, this is right. This is true. To build relevance into the smart home assistant. So the buttons, like I remember seeing news stories about like developers that were using them in dev kits, and they're like, "Well, I can't get them anymore."
Yes.
So that kind of gave way. Like Amazon created a whole new product category, and without even
Exactly,
knowing
and
it.
their whole backend, yeah, that's right. Their whole backend was actually customized for this order
Mm-hmm.
replenishment. It was a very, very cool thing. Yes, please move ahead. Move ahead. Go
Not a
ahead.
problem. I think about as a consumer and someone who has always followed technology, like how the form over function is
Mm,
changed over time, right? Like we talk about evolution. So first we had wired, then we had our early infrareds, where Grandpa would talk about the genie. But even today, you've got a lot of devices that still run off of a infrared signal. Radio frequency is all over the place. When then Bluetooth started becoming more and more relevant, but more in home or when you had an application. Zigbee is what most of us have in a lot of our smart home applications.
mm,
With the prevalence of Wi-Fi in almost any home, it made it easier for consumer goods to target things like Wi-Fi. But it
right.
makes sense given that there's a video signal over a high bandwidth. Uh, you know, I can't understand a world in which I can't stand out on a curb and just summon a vehicle Jetson style
Mm,
using a smartphone. But as we said before, there's that $1,000 piece of hardware. We can't just distribute those. And so we may want to have other opportunities to leverage a
mm,
similar distributed network or larger network
right.
using a button. So, we have a lot of different types of buttons on the market. And so why don't you go ahead and kind of lay out the two main camps that we have access to today?
Right, and what you see on this slide is the division between B2C and more B2B applications. B2C, personal and smart home focused buttons are on the left hand side that are mainly based on Wi Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee, so more near field communication type of technologies. Flick, as a button that many of you must have heard about, is a great use case for a smart button and why I love it is because they not only have a consumer version, but they also recently launched a B2B version. And then I also put an example from an IKEA button with which you can control a lot of things in your home, be it smart blinds, be it ambient lighting, be it your coffee machine, or even your air purifier. So a lot of these use cases from the left hand side target smart home applications and smart home related use cases. On the right hand side, what you have is more low power wide area network, where having a battery lasting for years and having a supported distance that's longer than just a few meters is more important. So this is the more B2B area. And many of the different technologies and different smartphones are supported by Sigfox, LoRa, or LTE-M and narrowband IoT. This is also
Hmm.
where our device and our Soracom LTE-M button comes also into the picture.
Yeah,
This is where, yes,
this is where I've seen a lot of applications like smart agricultural applications versus smart home. You know, in both of these cases, we're having to just deploy an infrastructure. At my home, it's my Google Mesh
mm,
network with the LP-WAN. You know, it's a series of specialized routers up on a pole, or getting them in all of the right places. And but in both cases, we're still having to build, deploy, and manage these networks where we want our devices to be. And
right,
then on like the smart ag side, like a lot of the LoRaWAN and LPWAN are lower bandwidth as well. So it's you're not going to be pushing a Ring doorbell levels of data through that. So
yeah,
you mentioned that Soracom is addressing a particular gap, and we discussed a lot about where that fits, and it's that what exists today, you're responsible for building and managing the networks that the devices that run on.
correct.
But we all happen to have devices that we carry every day that works on a network that isn't ours, right? And so
That's right.
let's go ahead and talk about the gaps that you saw as a product manager when you were looking to build a button.
Mm.
We're a telco a connectivity company that made hardware, so clearly there needs to be some good reasons why we would go and develop more hardware.
Oh, yes. And what is inside of our button is actually an MFF2 or embedded SIM card that's often referred as an eSIM that's running on LTE-M. So there is no need to build or maintain or even control the LTE-M network since it's falling back on the LTE infrastructure or 4G infrastructure of wherever you are. Um, what is also really, really cool with our button is that it has a cloud based support. So you can actually use different webhooks to different cloud services, such as Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, or even IBM Cloud. And there are also some custom made API libraries that you can get up and running and then use the button
And so
for different use
if I
cases.
had an
And that,
application, right? If I had an application of my own and I had my own API library, I would be able to have this button at the platform level trigger some of my own API calls as well, right?
that's right.
Okay.
And trigger different functions, different actions.
Sounds pretty simple. And then you mentioned that there's the embedded eSIM, a technology that most people are becoming more and more familiar with, which is the opportunity to have a small SIM already built right onto the circuit board. But it's also smarter than that. There's no Jason Bourne moment where you're pulling out the SIM, snapping it in half, and putting a new one into your device. Here you get the opportunity to have over-the-air updates. So just like there's a commercial or consumer grade eSIM in our pocket devices, commercial grade eSIMs allow for carriers like Soracom to push new regional profiles, new carrier support, the ability to move that button into new regions as things like the CAT-M1 or LTE-M spectrum is adopted. So we'll get into some of the global adoption of that frequency a little bit later. Is there anything else
Yes,
particular that you wanted to cover here? Do we move on
I
to
think
some of the different industries?
we can move on.
All right.
Let's move on.
This one right here. This is a lot of uh, data that we're not going to cover in depth, but it is, Dora, walk us through where it's not just cost and coverage that you'd be using to decide which smart button is right, since what we built is filling a gap and it's not a one size
Mm,
fits all. You know, what should their
no,
considerations
definitely
be?
not. So I would say that every type of different technology supports a specific use case. And as you say, there is no one size that fits all. Depending on the actual range that you are looking at to cover, depending on the throughput, there will be a specific choice for you to make when you choose your smart button. We were talking about smart homes earlier, where you would like to kickstart, for instance, the lighting or music in your home when you enter. Then you would definitely be relying on more Wi-Fi or Bluetooth based solutions because you would like to control things as soon as you enter the home and you are just a few meters from your home gateway. While if you would like to use your device in an unlicensed spectrum, you would be looking at Sigfox and LoRa, where the throughput is relatively small, but in return you get a very, very wide range. LTM and narrowband IoT run on licensed technologies, so there is less risk for actual data packet loss, and they also support the relatively long-term use cases with minimal power consumption.
All right, let's talk about some of the different industry benefits
Mm,
for smart buttons themselves. So we've just got a small glimpse here is just as far as some of the main industries that we're seeing an uptick or trend in the use of
yeah.
moving things off of a smartphone and moving it into a smart button. So, talk to me a little bit about what it is that you've been seeing from the product management side as you were looking into
Mm.
the creation of a button that could literally go anywhere and do just about anything. What is it that you're seeing?
Absolutely. The sky is the limit in terms of imagination and different use cases. And what you see here is six selected areas where we see our customers actually deploying different buttons. We can go from left to right. And the first one is personal safety. That can be especially relevant for lone workers. And for them, with the push of the button, they can initiate an emergency call. They can use a smart button as a panic button. They can use it for a security alert. And you can program the different button click types with different actions. One click can trigger the call of a number, another click can trigger sharing your location, and for instance, an extra long click can trigger a loudspeaker somewhere close by. When it comes to retail or e-commerce, the button is mainly used to ask for assistance. Imagine that you are in a store and you are waiting to be served. If you don't see anyone around, you just click the button and someone is going to get notified and come to you and serve you. So, this is to enhance customer experience. Transportation is one big area. One of the examples, again, more a consumer based one, is to call a taxi. We're going to have later on one more detailed example about that. So let me talk through that use case a bit later in a few minutes. Office and facility management. In this case, you can request maintenance, you can request cleaning, you can restock supplies in a restroom, for instance. So there again, there are plenty of opportunities where you can put a smart button
And
in use.
what I'm hearing here on as far as like why there's different smart buttons. If you don't have access to the on-site network, a job site might not have any existing network. The retail situation, it could be that it's more challenging to get onto the
Mhm.
store's network given all of uh, the challenges around as a vendor putting your device onto a larger store's network because of point of sale. And then the same thing is with the office and facility management. I could imagine
Mm,
as service technicians, you've got your large expensive printer copier and having that little button right on the side. So you're putting the device on call and hitting it will notify that there's either a problem or that a service technician should be
exactly.
able to come out and get something without going on the
Yep,
network. And those machines, they'll move from site to site sometimes. It doesn't have to be a
that's
copier,
right.
right? So thinking of trying to think through like what as we're looking at all of these different industries. Are you on
Mhm.
the move? Is the service on the move? Are you fixed to a specific location?
Yeah.
Transportation is the easy one, but uh, what do you see in the industrial automation and then some of the healthcare applications?
What you can do there is to report dysfunction, and we can stick with an industrial printer, for instance. If it malfunctions, all you need to do is to walk to the machine and then press the button when once you see that it's not working. As you said, you can request maintenance or the refill of paper or any type of material. That brings us in the industrial automation area.
So I do know that some office products or even some of the facilities will use cloud-based services of some kind, where
Mhm.
they don't have the physical device. Uh, I could see where the button could even be used to reset some sort of cloud service or remotely rebooting some sort of uh, server or clearing a cache. I mean, something as simple as uh, what normally would have to be done logging into a system if that device is
Yeah,
recognized since it has a SIM, it's got hardware security validation, it can be authenticated, and so it could perform an action that normally you'd need layers of security and access through like a cloud server of some kind, right?
yeah, yeah. That's right.
So
Yeah.
the number of potential things when we're not just having a button affect another physical device, but it's also could be affecting digital processes starts
Totally.
making you think a little bit more like where is the friction within a process. So go ahead, continue. I know you've got a little more notes that you've made out on some of these other areas.
Yeah, well, the healthcare and the elderly assistance, which is the last part on this slide, is bringing us back a little bit to personal safety. Like a smart button can be used again for emergency calls in case someone falls, or as a panic button as well. So it's a little bit related to the very first one. Um,
Yeah,
but this is a quite wide range, as you said, a quite wide range of different applications. And later on, we're going to have a kind of summary slide with even more of a collection for different use cases.
yeah. Everyone,
So,
yeah, we will be putting out a larger document with a whole. We've got long lists of different ideas that we are having as we're thinking through how this could be affected. But there is one theme I think that's in common here that we want everyone to walk away with is that when you look at hardware like these smart buttons that are on the market today, whether that's
mm,
a Flick or a Soracom cellular based button, that these are great stand-ins. They're really flexible for standing in for a proof of concept because the form factor that we have today may not be what
mm,
you need, but your first 10, 50, 100 for pilots,
yeah,
for even just doing that business viability test and proof of concept, this is a great opportunity to uh, find that product market fit. And then you get to go into the full design and then certification process to build out your own smart based button technology. So let's go through some of the advantages that people in a world where smart buttons are a thing, what is it that they're finding by implementing uh, some of these untethered experiences? So let's go ahead and start off with improved
yeah,
efficiency.
exactly. We collected five different benefits that we put together with smart buttons. And when it comes to improved efficiency, the main thing that one should remember is that you can actually automate a lot of different repetitive tasks, and yeah, basically avoid them
And if you go
to
to
do manually.
a picking facility like a Amazon warehouse, they use things like a
Mm,
pick to light type situation where it's using a series of wireless buttons to uh, more efficiently know where you're going or what you're doing or I've completed a task,
yeah,
and then having that traceability. So that ties very closely into streamlined workflows.
definitely. And this is where you perform exactly that specific task or a specific function, and you end up creating a more streamlined workflow via this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think about eliminating the need to take out a phone, launch the app, have it actually see
Mhm.
your face or your thumbprint, or unlock it, and then go in, go, oh, I had Spotify open, go over to the application, and then find the
Yeah,
button where you can just have that one authenticated button, just do the thing in line.
press
We're
it
coming
and
full
yeah,
circle, right? But in a lot of these
yeah.
workflows where we went to a touch screen type interface and going back to the BlackBerry
Yeah.
of interactions, the physical button. So when a button no longer has to be just a single use case, talk about the customization.
Mhm. Exactly. This is where you can actually automate based on a your own specific need. Like if you would like to use the button for order replacement or for replenishing different parts for a smart machinery or to monitor your inventory levels, that's where you put a smart button in place and in use.
So the
Yeah.
button is just for the developers out there. It's just an event driven thing, and it starts any number of digital, a cascade of
Mhm.
functions, cloud calls, logic functions, machine learning,
Yeah.
whatever it might be. So, uh, as far as making cost effective automation, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
This is basically to make sure that more complex automation is done in a much more affordable level. And I wouldn't stop with actual developers, but I would definitely look at bringing it into more B2B scenarios as well. Because one of the main drivers of IoT is to actually become more efficient and to save some dollars.
Well, it's convenience at the end of the
Yeah,
day. I mean, convenience should turn into efficiency, which through automation saves money and dot 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 profit, right? Step three, profit. Uh, so yeah, the business case makes a lot of sense. But when we
mhm.
make it full circle back to convenience, that still does come down to improved user experience, right?
Oh, definitely, yes. And we were talking about scheduling maintenance appointments and making sure that your user experience become much, much smoother just by calling a shop assistant to you, for instance.
I want,
Yeah.
I
So as you say, we go
yeah,
full circles.
I wonder how many times you would be able to use even the button, because fraud is such a problem in digital
Mm.
workflows. If it's simply instead of having to do two-factor authentication, even if it was, if you're at a service desk and they're like, you've got all these online automation things, you're scheduling an appointment with your maintenance technician and you're authorizing that, like some sort of you're linking accounts or something like that. It could be like, and I am a physical human, click, I'm hitting the button. So it, rather
Mhm.
than there being a chance for fraud or having to have all the extra moving parts for two-factor, uh, that you could actually verify, having that human step in the
Mm.
middle to supplement a series
Right.
of steps between maybe a service advisor and an end user.
Yeah, those different actions. Mhm.
So we made a button that fills certain use cases, and
Yes.
what's kind of neat is one of our founders, Kenta Yasukawa, he I remember him talking about, and he kept talking about, he's like, yep, we're going to make a magic button. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, I really want to give people the ability to experience our connectivity platform, but help get them to dreaming faster and leveraging the platform sooner by giving them a button that just kickstarts some of these early projects.
Mm.
And sometimes you might have that button press might replicate a complex machine starting and doing a whole lot of other things, when really you're just building out the reporting, or you're trying to build out the the digital workflows. And rather than actually
Mm.
wiring up the actual machine, you're like, and the machine technically ran. And so hearing him talk about
Right.
this button as a stand-in was actually kind of neat to hear about that vision, and how you and the rest of the team have brought this to life. So you clearly did a lot of requirements gathering. So talk to me about
Yes.
the specifics of and the reasons behind why you did certain things with the hardware design of this button.
We already talked about the embedded SIM card inside of the button. Um, that is looking actually like this, and you can compare the size with the Sharpie. I'm coming a little bit closer, so it's less blurry. Sorry about the blurring effect. Anyways, so there is an embedded SIM card that's running on the LTM network. This is no news for you already. Um, what we have also inside is a AA battery that is replaceable and can be even rechargeable. So the device actually confirms with some sustainability aspects. The unit is capable of detecting three different types of clicks. You can trigger a single click, a double click, and even a long click, which you need to press the button for longer than 2 seconds. And then you can actually trigger multiple actions depending on the click type. We also have a 3.5 millimeter jack input or jack audio input where you can put inside different sensors like a read switch or a temperature sensor. And based on the temperature measurements, for instance, you can trigger additional actions within the cloud. There is a built-in antenna as well, and that's how the LTM network is being reached and how the data is actually sent. Um, yeah, it confirms with IP54, so it's dust and moisture protected. And it also has multiple light functions. It has a green light that can flash or blink straight. It also has an orange and a red function, and there are different actions associated with each and every uh, click and each and every color
And
within the
are
button.
the colors of the button or the colors of the light programmable based off of uh, like what you're doing?
No, they are static.
Okay.
For instance, the green flashing means that the device is actually searching for a network. And when it starts simply statically blinking, or when there is a long blink, that means that that's when the data is actually being sent to the LTM network. No, they are not programmable,
That's all in the
but
cloud.
it's very easy
Everything
to,
else,
for instance,
you're
it's
right.
all in the cloud, yes.
And then actually, I think you mentioned that earlier is that the device is meant to operate just as an input device with several different input states. As far as the sensor that you hook up to it, you'd mentioned, does it take those readings and pass that on, or is it using the sensor to trigger an actual event?
You can do all of these. So, what happens when you do a button click is that through the LTM network, you send the actual data to a unified endpoint within the Soracom user console or Soracom platform. That's where you can also connect, for instance, an AWS function uh, and have the data, yeah, triggering some additional functions like sending an email, sending an SMS, or whatever you would like to program in the backend.
I think you've got an
And
example for this.
yeah, we're gonna have a lot of examples coming in a bit as well. Um, and it's working very amazingly. What I would like to add still is that there are some additional value-added services within the Soracom platform, such as Soracom Harvest and Soracom Lagoon, where you can actually store the data coming in from your smart button. That's the Harvest functionality, and within Lagoon you can even visualize that data. So it all comes together really well.
And my understanding of that is if you don't already have an AWS instance set up or a place to set up to send the data, you can choose to store the clicks and the actual accumulated data on Soracom's platform, which is built on top of AWS. So it's actually the same functionality, but it's just built into
Yes.
that account. So the data is in one place, and then it's using a visualization tool to build out customizable representations of data. Uh, and which service is that
Yeah.
that use that's similar to?
We are having a service called Harvest that is storing the actual data,
And then
and
Lagoon is the
Lagoon,
visualization.
that's correct,
Okay,
yes.
cool. Well, let's move on. We've put the button out into the world, and there was a lot of people that thought this was a really uh, needed device as far as filling a specific need. And you know what? We'll let you inform your own opinions and not just trust what some other people did. Because although my favorite one was the Amazon Dash button on steroids, that was a cool nod from Stacy and IoT podcast. So let's get a closer look at some of the specifics. And if this is a deeper dive than you were hoping for and you're listening to the recording, go ahead and hit chapter advance. Otherwise, we'll be moving into the use cases shortly.
Yeah, and here you can see a lot of details that we already talked about. I'm not gonna go in details about the weight or dimensions of the button, but what's important is the actual bands that the unit is supporting. And what's good to know is that there is a global module inside of the device that lets it connect from pretty much globally anywhere. So you can see the list of the different bands, and our current target countries cover the European Union as well as the UK, the US, and also some Asian countries where we have LTM coverage.
And what you're saying though is that
Um,
these bands are supported globally, but it's not necessarily true that Cat M1 is online in all of these countries. But these bands
yeah, Cat
are
M1
future
is,
proofing it.
yeah, definitely. And I think many of you know is that Cat M1 or LTM is a relatively new network technology. It's being continuously rolled out across the globe. You're going to be able to see a map or a network topology later on in the deck, where we actually show you where Soracom has supported LTM networks. Yeah, feel free to gaze through those later on. And one last thing that I would bring up on this slide is the option for white labeling the button. Obviously, the current button has a Soracom branding on it, but if someone would like to have their own logo appearing on the unit, we can cater for that need as well. Just come and talk to us about it.
All right, the use cases. I actually think these are pretty cool. Uh, let's go ahead and start with transportation.
Yeah, let's look at transportation. And this is where you have, for instance, a person who has just finished his meal at a restaurant. Uh, let's assume that his phone is that he cannot call an Uber. Uh, and instead, he notices that there is a Soracom button attached to the reception table of the restaurant. And there is a little sign under it saying, call a taxi. And what's going to happen when this person presses the Soracom button is that it's going to trigger or Soracom Funk function. Now, Funk is an adapter service, and it's basically sending data from a device directly to a cloud service. And it simplifies basically the logic that is on the device, and it's reducing the different resource compositions, and it's allowing the data to be sent through different protocols, be it TCP, UDP, HTTP, SMS, you name it. And in this case, in this use case example, what we see is that Funk is triggering a Lambda function that goes directly to another AWS feature called simple email services that lands directly with one of the taxi drivers, who then comes and picks up the person. This is the chain of actions that's happening in the
So
background.
you may be a local transportation service who goes to the restaurants and puts in your own little kiosk with the button inside, and rather than waiting for people to go, hey, I need a ride, it just calls someone to that, just like a concierge getting on the phone and calling a taxi cab on behalf of someone. So,
That's right, yeah.
all right. Next up, supply chain.
Yes, that brings us more into the logistical side of actions. And this is when someone is operating an industrial machine in one of the smart factories. And as you see, with a button click, you can trigger Soracom Beam, which is a proxy server built into our Soracom platform that forwards data from a device to an endpoint. And basically, proxying with Beam allows the user to offload any kind of encryption workload to the cloud. And then you can control the endpoint for multiple devices in the groups. And by pressing the button, the actual end action is to order, for instance, spare parts or additional raw material to to the line of manufacturing. Mm.
So, what I find interesting about this is that, especially in supply chain, so many facilities don't actually own the products that are on
Mm.
premise. It's a third party or a distributor or a vendor where their job is to keep those parts at a certain threshold. And so, having a third party button on a premise that doesn't have access to the like the current network. And why would you use
Mm.
cellular? Is I've got a background in the car wash world where you've got distributors that keep parts, supplies, chemicals, and so having the ability to uh, bind a specific button to say I need someone to come out and take care of this reduces the number of truck rolls. It starts getting into some of that like kind of a stepping stone towards the preventative world, right?
Mm.
Like we can't
Yep,
censor everything. Some cases you still need a human in the loop to address the we're low on
that's right.
something or something needs help. So I could see where that is with the need to order something, especially if it's going to be an offsite group. All right,
Mm.
maintenance programs. I think we actually touched a little bit on this
Yep,
one.
that's correct. Exactly. And you can see that here again, one of the workers uh, sends data via Soracom Funk. You might remember that Funk handles the data in the cloud without setting up all those complex server environments. And then in this use case, we are triggering an Azure function. So we are connecting to Microsoft Azure. You can, for instance, track your machinery better and make your workplace much more efficient. You can activate other machines securely in case you are working on one type of factory line and you would like to start the next one once you have finished on the previous one and you need some kind of automation. You could trigger that with a button click. And again, in case you are a lone worker in one of those factory sites, you can call to a different station at the push of a button, for instance. These are the actual use cases here.
All right. And now onto some of the other use cases that you've identified. I think this is more for a visual aid than anything else. Was there anything particular you wanted to pass on? We
I think we can leave it on. And actually, as it says on the slide, the applications, the different use cases are virtually endless. You can put the Soracom Smart button in use for any type of application, be it B2C or be it B2B related. This is really just a collection of the different use cases that we have seen or heard about from all over the industry.
all right. So, as far as taking some next steps, this is where we want to show. This is where
Mhm.
Sorcom has LTE coverage across the globe, but then when, as Dora said, the LTE or the Cat M1 uh, uh, coverage is only supported in certain areas. It's not quite a global rollout yet, but it's happening in each country. So here in the yellow, you can see these are regions in which the Cat M1 is supported right now. And I imagine that every 6 months or so, there will be updates to this type of coverage map. Um, so,
Right.
but this is where if you're buying a button and you want it to work, you'll want it to be in one of these regions if you're going to want it to be working right out of the gate. Last but not least, there are a number of places where you can get your own button. You can always go to soracom.io into your console if you're an existing customer. If you're new to this whole world, head over to Mauser Electronics and order it up and have a button in less than 48 hours. It's pretty impressive setup that they've got. And then CalChip is one of our other partners that they carry a whole wide variety of other on off the shelf pre-configured smart applications that are meant for doing early prototyping, and it's already kind of bundled together. and you can get all of your connectivity devices and even add a button into that mix for throwing something together. So uh, recommend checking those places out if you'd like to get one. So we're going to move to the question and answer, and I'm excited because there's actually a really good question in there from Norman asking about the uh, Soracom smart button with the different click functions, on whether it could be incorporated into some sort of smart button app on a smartphone. Um, is there anything that you could do digitally or virtually to replicate
Mm.
some of those same smart button features?
And it's so interesting, Norman, that you bring this up because in one of our internal hackathons a couple of years ago, this was actually realized. And as I understand, we created such a smart app, such a smart button app. I cannot answer why we did not actually publish it. I think it might to do with the fact that it takes quite some maintenance to roll an app out and make sure that it's gonna live for a while. Um, and yes, we are not specialized in app development within Soracom, but I know that this was actually yeah, put to life
And we have got a
a few
Git
years ago.
repository with some of those projects that, for people that want to tinker, could be available. Um, so, but it's your level of sophistication as far as managing and maintaining an ongoing app. That is a good question, though. As far as, like, could you build it in? And my understanding is that all of the same functions, though, that the button could perform are also supported by an API. So if you wanted to build in the functionality and virtually simulate button functions, that's something that you could make your own calls on if you have an existing app or a web application or a
Mhm.
mobile application. So you could build that functionality in a virtualized version, and you're just pointing to a unified endpoint, so you don't have to manage IPs or any of those pieces. It should be managed right in the Soracom console. You can create a virtual SIM as well, so you can simulate any cellular enabled device that's using the Soracom's ARC service, and you can check out the developer documentation on that. And that uses WireGuard. So if you've got yourself a Linux or Unix device, you can pull down WireGuard, and that device could actually see actual cellular devices, and they would all show up on the same device network. So you can create your own intranet of things and do some cool development with that as well. So when the number of possibilities for finding new solutions, it really is almost endless on the number of ways. So great question. Thank you for asking that one. Oh,
We actually, yeah, we can do that. And when we are talking about developer docs, we have a brilliant site uh, with describing some of these use cases we have shown you under the Soracom developer documents. I can actually link it in a minute, but we can also send it out, I think, together with the handout. We could include it as an additional slide into this material later on.
yeah, and Dave
So
asked
feel free.
about the GitHub um, that we were
Exactly.
discussing,
We
whether
need
to
to
share that out.
check. Yeah, let's check, Ryan, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's on our public GitHub or on the Soracom internal GitHub. We have two different versions. Um, the actual smart button app. But what I can do right away is to link here the developer documents and how to start up the Soracom LTE button related development. So
Yeah.
just give me one
So,
second.
Dave, I'm making a note here about that because we have a very, very large active maker community in Japan. And a lot of these projects do have public facing Git repositories for a lot of these projects that people are building. So I'll go ahead and look into that. I know we're currently translating a lot of the the Japanese blogs as well, where they feature a lot of these external facing things. So uh, if we've got a public facing one for you, I'll go ahead and see that we get that in a follow up out to attendees.
Cool. There is an additional question coming in about what module is inside of the button. It's a sequence monarch that's inside. And I can see under the handouts already the downloadable format of the slide deck.
All right. So go ahead and check out the handouts tab, and you can get a copy of the presentation that we just shared. And if there is any other questions, we will give you 30 more seconds. If not, this has been a pleasure taking time talking about smart buttons and some of the decisions that we've made on the product team and what else we've evaluated as we've been kind of going through this journey of making buttons do things through the cloud in a world where buttons are smarter than you. Okay, well, that's not true either. So, all right, everyone. Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure and take care.
Thank you so much.